This is the rigging toolbox, and it consolidates many of Lightwave's most common rigging tools into a single interface to make manual rigging tasks that much quicker and easier without having to go through many different panels or menus. It has two tabs: the Settings tab, which contains all of the shortcut interface, if you will, for Lightwave's general rigging toolset, and the Tools tab, which contains various auto rigging tools for taking multi-step or multi-stage operations and consolidating them down to just a quick couple of clicks. You'll notice along the top here that you have selection buttons for different channels of items, and the various tools will use these settings where appropriate to decide which channels certain controls are applied to. To see all of this in action and how it works, let's take a look at these mainline tools in the panel here. First of all, we'll look at the assignment tools here. These allow you to assign all of Lightwave's standard different motion control or rig assignments simply by selecting items in the interface, either directly in the viewport or via things such as the scene editor or the schematic editor, or pretty much anywhere else that you make a selection. You'll notice that you have these Store and Get Assignee buttons. These are used to get you around the fact that you can't make cross selections in Lightwave. It is, for instance, impossible to select both the light and camera at the same time. So let's start out with just a simple parenting example. You can see here that I have a null, light and camera. If I choose, say, the camera, Store Assignee, I click on. I can then select the null, and if I click Parent, you see that the camera becomes a child of the null. In this way, the assignee which you store is the thing that will get the appropriate assignment here added to it from the secondary selection. So let's say that I have two lights, for instance. I'll just clone my light there. I can select them both because this works with multiple assignments. I can store assignee, choose perhaps the camera, and click Target. And we see now that both of these lights have been set to target the camera. We'll just set everything there. For the moment, we'll just set everything back to normal, so nothing is assigned to anything. And we'll see how these selections here start to play. For instance, if I select only the heading here, once again, I'll select one of the lights, hit Store Assignee, choose the camera, and click Target. And what we see happens in this instance is that whilst the light is targeted on its heading channel, it is not targeted on its pitch. Reason being that we only have the heading selected here. You'll notice if I have everything selected, and we take for instance this light, we will Store Assignee, come back to, let's say, the null this time, and hit Pole. Then what we see is that of course the null has become the pole item here for the light. But even though we had everything selected, position, rotation and scale, because pole only makes any sense for the bank controller, you can see that of course it has only been set on the bank. There was no need for us to deselect everything but the bank. In this way, you can see that in certain contexts, these channel selections make a difference to the tool, and in others they do not. For instance, if I come back to this light here again, I'm going to have just the X and Y selected, Store Assignee, come to the null, and I will choose Pos Item. What we see is that the light has been constrained to the null in the X and Y channels, but of course not in the Z. And of course, whilst it has picked up the null as the position item, it has not picked it as the rotation item. To do that, we would use the rotation item assignment, the scale item assignment, and so on. So like this, you can assign parents, targets, poles, goals, and so forth. You can also change a control method here via the control drop-down, which is basically the same as the channel control drop-downs that you have ordinarily on the motion options panel. Of course, like the other tools, this obeys the selection there. So if I chose pitch and perhaps chose inverse kinematics, then we can see when we look at the light's motion options here that the pitch controller has there been set to inverse kinematics. Of course, if you're wanting to undo things like this, then you can select all of the channels, go to keyframes, and your items are set back just to keyframe operation on all of their channels like this. The Get Assignee button here works a little differently, but it's a very useful thing to have, and it's most easily demonstrated on a character rig or similar as we have here. Get Assignee will get to the items that have a certain item assignment. This is most easily demonstrated directly. For instance, here we have an IK leg, and this IK leg has a pole item. Now, if you are trying to make modifications to this rig or pick through it, or perhaps you've received a rig from someone else and you're trying to understand how it is built, then finding the item in this rig that is actually poling towards this pole item can take a bit of searching. If, for instance, we just select the thigh bone and we look at its motion options, we can see that it's certainly not that. It is somewhere else. Get Assignee will find this for us. So I can select the pole item here, choose Get Assignee, and then click on Pole, and bingo, we have selected here the item is the left leg plane 1. That is, of course, the IK plane item. Similarly, here we have within the foot system this item called the IK Actual, which is the actual goal item that the IK limb is reaching for. I can click Get Assignee, Goal, and it picks, in this case, the ankle bone itself, which is the item which, as we can see in the motion options here, has that item set as its goal object. Do notice that it works specifically this way around. If I have the ankle joint or foot bone here selected and I choose Get Assignee Goal, it does not select the goal item because, of course, that is easy enough to look up just by looking in the motion options. And nothing is selected, or rather the selection doesn't change, because this bone is not the goal item for anything. This will also work with multiple items, so in the case of here, the foot controller, which does lots of fancy things on the reverse foot rig, there are many items that are using this, for instance, as rotation item. If I choose Get Assignee and then click Rot Item, we can see that a whole bunch of items here are selected because all of these items are looking towards that null there as the rotation constraint item. As such, this Get Assignee becomes a very useful tool if you are building a rig yourself and you're wanting to get back to an item that you have assigned something to, or if you are picking through some rig that has come from somewhere else and you're trying to find how it's all pieced together. Get Assignee will help you to find the items very quickly and easily. Down here then, we see that we have simple switches, which are basically toggles for things that are ordinarily found on the motion options panel. So what I'm going to do is take the light here, do a Store Assignee, pick the null and make it the rotation item. There we see, of course, the light rotation is now following the null. We'll just bring up the motion options here so that we can see what they are. We see it's got the null and same as item on all three channels there. And the most common options that we would want to change are available to us here. So we can switch it between interpolate and compensate mode. We can turn world rotation on or off from here. WP is of course world position, and that would toggle the world position toggle there. And we could change the multiplier or the addition factor here. So if I change that to 2, and let me just uncheck the pitch there, you see that when I change this here to 2, the multiplier over here has changed to 2 on the heading and the bank, but of course not the pitch. We have here similar switches on the IK, which affect the goal behavior here. So since we have our camera with its goal set as the null, you can see that we can change the goal objective type like this. We can toggle the unaffected by IK of descendants there, match goal orientation, and the keep goal within reach option. We can also quickly add and change item shapes here. Of course, item shapes go on nulls, not cameras or lights. So I could put a item shape box there onto my null, change its size, perhaps use a pyramid, of course change the axis on which it is drawn, change the fill display, make it X-ray whereby it can be seen through mesh items, and draw to, which comes back to the assignee. So if I choose the camera here, choose store assignee, come back to my null and click draw to, the null now draws a line to the camera. If I want to turn that off, I just select the null, click draw to again, and that toggles the draw off. Finally, down here on the extra tab, you can see that we can do things such as hide, which will hide an item, and of course we can toggle item locking there as well. And of course, if I pick that light out somehow, I can unhide it by again just re-clicking hide. As such, this whole main section here of the settings tab gives you quick and easy access to all of the main rigging tools and settings that you would normally access either through the scene editor or the various tabs of the motion options panel, without having to click through multiple tabs or scroll through multiple menus to set things for different channels. All of it can be done much quicker and easier from here. Details of the other tools in the rigging toolbox we shall see in further videos.